Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into the core machinery of electromagnetism.
We are indeed.
We're tackling a pivotal chapter, diving deep into how we handle magnetic fields, specifically with a powerful new tool, the vector potential, usually called a baller.
That's the one. Think back to electrostatics. Calculating the electric field, that's often way easier if you find the scalar potential to feel first, right?
Right, find a fail, take the gradient, boom, you have Euler. Much simpler sometimes.
Exactly. Now, for steady currents and the magnetic fields they create, the dollar field, well, it's more complex. Currents are vectors, the fields loop around. You need a vector tool to simplify things.
And that tool is this vector potential.
Precisely. It brings back that kind of mathematical elegance we found with LRI.
Okay, but why do we need it? I mean, can't we just use Ampere's law or Biot-Savart? Why invent something new? Is it just for convenience, or is there a deeper reason?
Well, it's both. But the deeper reason comes first. It's tied to a fundamental property of magnetic fields, at least in magnetostatics where currents are steady.
Okay.
The key physical fact is there are no magnetic monopoles, no isolated north or south poles analogous to positive and negative charges.
Right, you always get dipoles, loops. You cut a magnet in half, you get two smaller magnets.
Exactly. And mathematically, this translates directly to saying the divergence of the magnetic field is always zero. Nabla de OB equals zero deal. Everywhere.
Which is the math way of saying the field lines always close on themselves, no beginnings or ends.
Perfect. That's exactly what Nabla Biot means physically. And here's the mathematical magic. Any vector field whose divergence is zero can always be expressed as the curl of some other vector field.
Always. That's a strong statement.
It's a fundamental theorem of vector calculus. If Nabla AD equals B, then there must exist a vector field 8 such that ball A is equal to the curl of H. So ball A 8 times H, A8 takes me 2. That's basically the definition of a dollar.
Okay, so $1 comes from the gradient of the scalar, and dollar comes from the curl of the vector. There's a nice parallel there.
There really is. The curl operation, it measures the rotation or circulation in a field. Since battlefield lines circulate around currents, it kind of makes intuitive sense that battle dollar is related to the circulation of dollar.
So finding out $1 first turns the problem of finding the dollars into something potentially easier.
That's the hope. Find out a dollar, then compute its curl.
Now, you called a mathematical tool. Is it unique? If I know dollars, is there only one possible dollars that could have created it?
Great question. And the answer is no, it's not unique. This is a really important point.
Oh, so?
Remember how adding any constant to the scalar potential E field dollar didn't change the electric field? Because the gradient of a constant is zero?
Yeah, the potential difference is what matters, not the absolute value.
Right. Well, for Ala, there's something similar but a bit more complex. You can add the gradient of any arbitrary scalar field, let's call it dc, to dr. So you get dollars, a dollar, plus nabla. If you then take the curl of this new dollar, you get nabla times a plus nabla times a plus nabla times. But the curl of a gradient is always zero. That's another vector identity.
So the extra term vanishes.
Exactly. So by dollars, nabla times a equals nabla times a. You can change dollars in this specific way by adding a gradient without changing dollars at all. This freedom to choose is called gauge freedom.
Gauge freedom. It sounds like physicists just gave themselves a way to make the math easier by picking the right gauge.
Well, yes. That's exactly what we do. It's like choosing where zero elevation is. You can set it at sea level or the ground floor, whatever is convenient. The height difference between 2 points stays the same. That's like by dollars. The absolute potential dollar depends on your arbitrary 0 point, your gauge choice.
So what's the convenient choice here?
In magnetostatics, we often choose the Coulomb gauge. It's defined by setting the divergence of AD0, nabla dot A equals elite naught. This choice simplifies the equations we need to solve later on.
Okay, that feels a bit abstract. Let's try to visualize. Solar. If we have a simple, uniform magnetic field, say it's a dollar, pointing straight up along the z-axis, what does the Euler field that produces that dollar look like? Is it just pointing up too?
Surprisingly, no. And this is key to understanding that dollars isn't just dollar in disguise. For a uniform dollar field pointing along z, the vector potential dollar actually circulates around the z-axis.
It circulates, like in circles.
Yes, in this I-plane. The magnitude of dollar increases linearly with the distance from the z-axis, and its direction is tangential to circles centered on the z-axis. Think of stirring water in a bucket. The water circulates.
So dollar points up, but dollar goes around. That seems weird. Why?
Because baller isn't dollar, it's the curl of a dollar. The curl measures how much a field is circulating or rotating locally. To get a constant upward dollar field, you need an dollar field that's constantly circulating around that axis, with its circulation strength increasing as you move outwards.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see. A dollar reflects the potential for circulation that results in a dollars. It's definitely a distinct field.
It is. It carries information about the sources in a different way than baller does.
All right, so we accept dollar exists. It's related to dollar by the curl. It's not unique, but we can choose a gauge like nabla or day A equals da. Now, the big question, how do we actually find dollar if we know the currents, dollar, that are creating the magnetic field?
Right, the practical part. We start with Ampere's law for magnetostatics. A nabla times B equals the wood. Oh wait, Feynman uses Gaussian unit, so it's nabla times B, 4 pic J. And we substitute blooded times alla times A.
So you get nabla times A, 4 pic. That looks complicated. Curl of a curl.
It does, but there's another vector identity. Nabla times A, nabla A, nabla tot A.
Precisely. That first term, nabla tot A, just becomes 0 because we chose the Coulomb gauge.
Brilliant simplification.
Okay, so that leaves nabla tilde A, but it just becomes 0 because we chose the Coulomb gauge. Brilliant simplification.
Okay, so that leaves nabla tilde A, 4 pic J, or nabla 2A equals 4 pic J. Almost. In Feynman's units, most 1 is absorbed differently, and the equation becomes nabla 2A equals J, epsilon C2. That's the form analogous to electrostatics.
Let me see. The equation for the scalar potential file from charge density order was Poisson's equation. Nabla 2 equals 2A. Excellent. Look at the structure.
Wow, they are mathematically identical. Just replace the scalar phi with the vector A equals and the scalar charge density ERS with the vector current density tablet and that 222 factor.
Exactly. The Laplacian operator nabla 2 acting on the potential equals the source density times constants. This is huge.
Why huge? Because we already know how to solve Poisson's equation.
Precisely. We spent ages solving nabla 2 phi as well as epsilon dollars in electrostatics. The general solution is an integral. A phi at some point is the integral of Devore over all space, divided by the distance.
So we can just write down the solution for apple to by analogy? Yes. Since nabla 2A Nache, epsilon C2 is just 3 scalar Poisson equations, one for x with source jx, one for A with j over from arrows with j is A, the solution for each component of A day is the same kind of integral.
You mean x is found by integrating js over volume divided by distance, a is by integrating j, and a is by integrating jd.
That's exactly it. One mathlon CAA DDVR. It replaces trying to solve the Biot-Savart Law, which involves a tricky vector cross product inside the integral, with 3 potentially much simpler scalar integrals.
Okay, that is a significant computational advantage. Let's see it in action. First classic example, the long straight wire carrying current A to J.
Okay. Assume the wire is along the z-axis. The current density J only has a z component, jz day.
So we only need to calculate A's right. Epsilon Asia will be 0 because J was and J are 0.
Correct. We solve the nabla 2Az epsilon c day. This is mathematically identical to finding the electric potential d day from a long line of charge.
And the solution for that was proportional to the natural logarithm of the distance from the line.
Exactly. So A is proportional to AR. Then to get A dollar, we compute A to libel times AR. Since ADOL only has an Azar component that depends on TIR, the curl calculation gives a dollar field that points purely tangentially, circling the wire, and its magnitude falls off as O dollar.
Which is the known result for a long wire. Okay, the method works. Checks out.
It confirms the machinery, but as you said, not earth-shattering news there.
So does this ADOL field ever give us something genuinely surprising, something that BADOL alone doesn't show us?
Yes, absolutely yes. The long solenoid, this is where dollar starts to feel, well, more real, perhaps.
The solenoid. Okay, that's the coil, like a spring, carrying a surface current. What's the standard result for BADOL dollars?
For an ideal, infinitely long solenoid, the magnetic field dollars is perfectly uniform inside the coil, pointing along the axis, and it's exactly 0 everywhere outside the coil.
Right. B dollars outside. Put a compass out there, it doesn't move.
Now, let's calculate the vector potential dollars for this solenoid using our integral formula or by solving the differential equation.
Okay. What do we find?
Inside, we find an auxiliary field that circulates around the axis, similar to the uniform field case we discussed earlier, which makes sense because Baudot dollar is uniform inside. But outside?
Outside a baller is 0, so baller must be 0 too, right? Or at least constant, because its curl has to be 0.
Ah, but remember, a dollar doesn't have to be 0 for its curl to be 0. It could be the gradient of some scalar function. And in this case, outside the solenoid is not 0.
Wait, seriously, V dollars outside, but $1 outside, but $1 outside.
Correct. Outside the solenoid still circulates around the axis, but its magnitude falls off as non-zero, even though the local magnetic source field to dollar is identically zero.
Hold on. How can that be? If a dollar is just a mathematical tool to get dollar dollars, how can it exist where dollar doesn't? What does it mean for dollar to be non-zero there?
That's the profound point. It means odd dollars contains information that dollars doesn't, at least not locally. The non-zero dollar outside is related to the total magnetic flux trapped inside the solenoid. Even though you can't measure a dollar field locally outside, the system knows about the trapped flux via the dollar field.
So dollar has a kind of non-local property. It feels the effect of the dollar field somewhere else.
In a sense, yes. And this has real physical consequences, most famously demonstrated in the Aharonov-Bohm effect in quantum mechanics, where charged particles are affected by odd dollar even when moving through regions where they dollars. It strongly suggests a dollar loss is perhaps more fundamental than dollar.
Wow. Okay, that is surprising. Let's shift gears slightly. What about localized sources, like a tiny loop of current?
Yes, this leads us to the magnetic dipole moment. If we take a small rectangular loop, say side lengths and current dollars, and we calculate the vector potential dollar far away from this loop.
Using the integral John-Jure dVV again?
Yes, approximating for large distances. We find that the Euler field looks like the potential from a magnetic dipole. We define the magnetic dipole moment, Pirlo. Its magnitude is the current times the area of the loop.
Okay, Murdo I times area. And it's a vector. Which way does it point?
Perpendicular to the plane of the loop, usually given by a right-hand rule. Curl fingers in direction of current, thumb points in direction of view.
Got it. So we find far from the loop. What about the Euler field that comes from this S?
When you calculate Euler times, using the expression for dollar from the magnetic dipole, you find something remarkable. The resulting Euler field components have exactly the same mathematical form as the electric field LR components far from an electric dipole.
An electric dipole? You mean like a small separation between a positive and a negative charge?
Exactly. The field patterns look identical at large distances. One generated by a tiny current loop, the other by separated charges.
That's a striking similarity. But you emphasized earlier no magnetic charges.
Absolutely crucial distinction. The source is fundamentally different. The magnetic field comes from circulating current, quarter times area, while the electric field comes from separated static charges, quarter times distances. Even though the far fields look the same mathematically, we must remember the magnetic field originates from moving charge, not static magnetic poles.
Okay, important caveat. Now, one more connection. Most of us probably learned the Biot-Savart Law first for calculating Biot-Savart Law first for calculating Biot dollars from currents. How does that fit into this whole vector potential picture? Is it related or separate?
Oh, it's directly related. The vector potential method is arguably more fundamental. The Biot-Savart law can be derived from the vector potential.
Really?
Remember our integral solution for epsilon? For currents flowing in thin wires, the current density J times the volume element 20 phi can be replaced by the current dollar times the path element vector math BFS.
Okay, so the volume integral becomes a line integral along the wire. Propto int fracto int.
Precisely. Now, if you take this expression for all dollar, which is a line integral, and you calculate ball dollars permeable times A, well, the vector calculus gets a bit involved. You have to be careful with the curl operating on the integral.
But when the dust settles...
When the dust settles, you get exactly the Biot-Savart law for the magnetic field ball dollar.
Wow. So Biot-Savart is just what happens when you find a dollar for a wire first and then take its curl.
Essentially, yes. It shows the vector potential framework is the deeper one.
So this brings us back to the practical side. If Biot-Savart gives ball dollar directly, why did we go through all this trouble with autoroles? You said it's often easier.
It often is, yes. Let's
Yeah.
recap why. Finding ball dollar with Biot-Savart involves one integral, but it's a vector integral with a cross product inside. That can be quite tricky to evaluate. Finding dollar first involves solving for scalars, ISA separately. Each of these requires solving a scalar integral, like dkd, jxr, dvd. These three scalar integrals are often mathematically simpler to handle than the single vector integral of Biot-Savart.
So trade one hard vector integral for three easier scalar integrals.
That's the trade-off. And for complex geometries, the dollar route is frequently the more manageable path. Plus, as we saw with the solenoid, OLS seems to carry more fundamental information, especially important in relativity and quantum mechanics. But dollar is what we measure directly via forces, but a dollar might be closer to the underlying reality.
What a journey. Okay, so wrapping up. We needed the vector potential dollar because magnetic fields are divergenceless, nablatod B equals other. This means a dollar must be the curl of something, and that something is other.
But dollar isn't unique. We have gauge freedom. We usually pick the Coulomb gauge, nabla dollar A, for simplicity.
which then leads to an equation for epsilon A, epsilon C2 that looks just like Poisson's equation for the scalar potential file.
allowing us to calculate $8 using integrals analogous to electrostatics, often component by component, which can be easier than using Biot-Savart directly.
And the example showed it works, but more importantly, the solenoid revealed something profound. Dollar can be non-zero even where the force field dollar is zero.
Exactly. It suggests a dollar isn't just a mathematical trick, it reflects deeper physics, like the influence of enclosed flux. It really positions $8 as the central quantity in magnetostatics, perhaps even more primary than a dollar itself.
Which leaves us with a really provocative thought, doesn't it? If dollar can exist and have measurable effects, like an Aronoff bohm, in regions where dollar is zero, is a dollar the real field, and dollar is just one of its manifestations?
That's the question that physicists continue to explore. What is the fundamental nature of these fields? The vector potential dollar certainly forces us to think beyond just the force field dollar, something for you to definitely ponder.